Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Yay.
There's a pretty funny intro on a YouTube channel. I forget the name of it. And it's got a cute little welcome to the show riff. I kind of feel like we need one of those. I mean, isn't that what the mental wealth tip is really about?
You mean like welcoming people to the show?
Yeah, partially.
Yeah. Well, we want to give people something nice to take, it's sort of like the show will be over, but this is something they can always have.
Exactly. And before we go down the dream interpretation rabbit hole, kick us off. Welfin me.
Okay. People like you and I, we don't treat mental illness. We treat trauma responses, and we treat ways that people cope, and we treat subconscious programming.
And crackheads.
And that too, and substances, that kind of thing. So that's the mental health wealth tip, is that take a look at these things if you're looking at mental illness.
I like it.
I'm glad because I try to, make you feel better.
And, I feel like I haven't seen you in like years, weeks, months, days even.
We're like two ships passing in the night.
I know. Why is that?
Because you're so freaking busy and I'm sitting here all day doing nothing.
Baloney. I was going to give the unfiltered YouTube version on that one, but bull hockey.
Well, it's good to
see. I know
see
you're busy.
Good to see you even in this nano universe.
Yeah. I feel like our electrons are playfully dancing together in some physical model of the universe.
They always do.
So we're having a guest on the show today. It turns out it's you, because you know more about dream interpretation than I ever will, and anyone that I know. And I have like so many questions.
I hope I have some answers.
Well, one, at what point in American psychoanalysis do you think dream interpretation had the most attention, the most clinical application, meaning like a lot of practitioners were incorporating it? It was, I guess, at its peak? Because to me, it seems like we don't talk much about dream interpretation, and I find that kind of sad and unusual, because we certainly can learn a lot about our psyche from our dreams.
Well, I think right at the beginning, Freud said dreams were the royal road. Freud, here he is.
Who?
Freud, here he is. He's all
He's
white.
Such a camera hog. He's such a camera hog.
Yeah, we have different versions of him.
What a camera hog.
But I think Freud was inspiring, even though I don't agree with his theories. But he said dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. And, then he made the road a little crooked. I mean, his interpretation of what dreams mean don't make any sense to me now. But my thing with Freud is this: I think he was very brave. And the other thing was, I knew somebody who spoke fluent German and read his books in the original German, and he was far more biological than we in America know, because Anna Freud was, who took hold of the psychoanalytic movement, was not a medical doctor. She was not biology based. So everything was pushed over to this psychological interpretation. And I don't really agree with what his interpretations are, but it probably had its peak, right? As this thing got rolling, when psychoanalysis was king, 30s, 40s, or even the 50s. But then other things crept in, behavioral treatments. Reich showed up with some body treatments. Jung was around, and some of these schools had dreams as part of their what they used for treatment. It's funny because I've studied this a lot, and I like Jung, and I'll talk about him in a minute. But the guy that I actually really like the best is Edgar Casey, the
Oh yeah.
psychic. Casey said that in dreams, there are 4 levels of dreams. He said there's biology. So if you have to pee, you'll have a certain kind of dream. There's biography, something that's from your past. There's precognition and clairvoyance, that people can access these interesting states. So I kind of always look for that. I want to see what's there. Jung believed that everything in the dream was about the dreamer. And
Meaning that the other characters in your dream are just different reflections of your own, of yourself, or your own inner psyche.
And that's kind of where I go with this. For me, I look at dreams as stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And we build a language. When you study your dreams, there's a symbolic language that comes out. For example, I dream a lot about places. So if I'm dreaming, I've realized over years of therapy and years of analyzing my own dreams, if I dream about California, that's my father. If I dream about New York, that's my mother. If I dream about anywhere else, that's me. Okay.
What about, okay, so my wife told me that she had a bizarre dream last night, and it was so bizarre that I said, hey, we're going to talk about this on the show because I got to ask the good doctor.
Well, it wasn't your wife's dream then, it was some random person's dream, right?
I mean, okay, it was not my wife's dream, but I have a friend, asking for a friend.
Asking for
who
you're in trouble. Maybe
the dream was I cheated on her with George Takei. So go run with that. What in the world does that mean? Because that has so many levels of bizarre to me.
I think it means that she wants to go out for a nice Japanese meal.
Well, I did promise her that
anything else is
my friend.
Anything else is going to get me in trouble, I think. She cheated. Well, actually, do you want to really know?
Kind of. What I want the viewers to understand is like the general approach to dream interpretation. Like what's the mechanism? Do you look just at the emotions and the interpersonal interactions and the emotions that go on it? Do you rely more on the symbology, like, well, a snake means this, and and water means that?
There's no classical interpretation for George Takei. So I mean, we have to go. I look at I do look at classical interpretations just kind of as a starting point, if there are, Okay, so what is George Takei? I start to riff in my own head. Well, there's Star Trek, science fiction. He's Asian. He's gay too.
And yeah.
And so what I would say is she may want you to go to a more Eastern medicine.
So it's not that she's having a prognostic vision that I
don't think so, because it usually doesn't happen that directly. So
he'll be happy to know.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's what it means, but I think it's wanting you to be more Eastern in your approach, a little more radical, a little more science fiction. I think that's where that dream goes. It's a wish, and maybe a wish that she could do this too.
But there's an infidelity piece of it too.
Well, you're married to your work too. I don't think it's about another partner for you, except that your work is your partner. I would say that
we have been busy since the pandemic, and we've been burning the candle on both ends and trying not to burn ourselves out.
Yeah, those kind of dreams are always fascinating to me, because that kind of a metaphor is really personal. Now, I know you guys, so I know you're into science fiction. I know you're into Star Trek, as am I. Yeah, you got him somewhere. I know I got him. Got you that Captain Picard guy. To me, what we're looking at Okay, is there a classical interpretation? Okay, so somebody dreams about water, an ocean. So that's usually the unconscious, or its sexuality, or its emotion. And you're on pretty solid ground if you say, well, okay, well, um, what do you have these options? What do you, and I would say to the patient, well, what do you think it means? Because what we're really looking for is making the unconscious conscious so that people can deal with it in a more effective way. Say, well, oh, okay, I had a dream. It's funny, I wrote a song called The Dreamer's Story, and all these dreams were dreams that I actually had, and I put them in the song. So a dream is a story we tell to ourselves about ourselves. A dream is a letter sent from the soul to make us whole. I'm riding in a car with no steering wheel on a bridge that stops in midair. A tidal wave approaches, it can't be real, so why am I feeling so scared? The next verse is, so if my dreams are created by me, why is the pain so intense? And if it's self-inflicted, you might agree, what an odd thing to sense. My first love appears at my birthday party. She smiles and seems in good health. I kiss her deeply. She says, I'm sorry, honey, you're kissing yourself. That was
Whoa.
actually a dream that I had. And I went,
You're like
whoa, I
a
woke.
you're like a poet and you don't even realize it.
Well, I write a lot of song lyrics, but the bottom line was that was like my dream self kind of confirming my studies of Jung, who by the way, he was a wild man, but I like him very much, especially around dreams. Jung
Well,
believed that.
he
Go
wouldn't you
ahead.
say he improved on, or I, I always think of Jung, at least in the dream interpretation, which I did read. What's Jung's big book? Dream. I think it's
Memories,
called Dream
dreams, and
Interpretation,
yeah.
right?
Well, he has a book on dream interpretation, but his biography, I think, is called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, or something.
That's it. Maybe that's it. I read both of them, but I always figured he, the was it Einstein that said, "I only saw farther because I stood on the shoulders of giants." I always felt like Jung's dream interpretation was totally built off of Freud's momentum, and Freud was getting a little bit of flack about, well, everything's sexual and everything, and to the point where he had to kind of like push back and say, I forgot how you say the interpretation of dreams in German. But he pointed out, like, nowhere in that work did he ever say anything about every dream requiring a sexual interpretation. But then Jung seemed to be more, when they expanded on that, seemed more interested in the symbology and the content, whereas
Well,
Freud was
Jung
looking
had
at like the unconscious and the
well,
animus.
Freud had a model, with symbology, and I think that the sexual part of this became somewhat sensationalized. Gee, what a shock! Jung's idea had to do with archetypes, that there
Mhm.
was that there were these symbols that reflected psychological development in a human being that were worldwide, cross-cultural symbols. I tend to go more towards a personal unconscious, that each person writes their own language of symbology, but I don't want to ignore the other stuff because I'll use anything that works. Because you say to a person, okay, well, you had a dream that you were swimming in the ocean. Okay, well, I will say, well, classical dream interpretation says that's either the unconscious or your emotions or sexuality. Any of that ring true for you? And then let's see what they come up with, because it's about their experience of their inner world and how it relates to the outer world that I care about. The dreams will work on so many different levels. And right now, what I'm seeing with people are having very, very spiritual dreams right now, dreams about what's
Mm.
going on now and the spiritual meaning of it. And that includes me. And I'm very impressed. I'll give you an example of a dream, okay? My own. So the Lightning have a player named Victor Hedman. He's a very wonderful player, and I'm a big Lightning fan. Just in case anybody forgot, I got this guy here too. But that's not Victor. So I'm on a train, And train, any vehicle is the vehicle is the way your life is going, which I like. That's a classical interpretation that I like. So I'm on a train, and Victor Hedman comes in with his family, and they come by, they wave hello, and they go to the next car, and then terrorists come on the train and kill him. So I woke up going, wow, is Victor Hedman going to die? I said, I don't think so. I said, well, wait a minute, Hedman, what would that be about? It must be about being a psychologist. That must be, some fear that I have. And then I went, oh, that was a couple of days later. I went, oh, it's about being a leader. Head man. It was my fears of really getting out and being a leader in teaching this stuff, which, by the way, is kind of the next step for us. The bottom line is, it could have worked in the fact that it was about a psychologist, or it could have worked that, I just kind of like trains and don't get to ride them very often.
Well, you mentioned the dreams during the pandemic dreams, and I found that really interesting in like researching for the show. That already, I mean, there's so many things we're not talking about because we're just focused on crisis, and overcapacity hospitals and body counts and all of this like super urgent stuff. We're barely talking about mental health. The only mental health I've really heard in any media is just the frontline workers and all that. So we're certainly not going to hear much about the pandemic dreams, but it's interesting. I think it was the Museum of London in partnership with the Western University of Canada has this big project where they're collecting all these dreams from the public and analyzing them, and they're calling the COVID-19 dreams or pandemic dreams. How does Jung's theories and the collective unconscious play in shaping our dreams, like during a global event like this, where if we're plugged in with all the other human brains, as we spoke about on an earlier show, maybe these dreams aren't even mine, or maybe they're, at least partially influenced by someone else or the pandemic reaction in someone else's brain.
That's a great question, and I
Thank you.
can give you thoughts, but I can't give you an answer because who the heck knows? I would say, that we have the opportunity to plug into the collective unconscious all the time, but especially in our dreams, and that we get certain bits of data, and that may be why we are creating a screen for that data in the dream. I've had COVID dreams, by the way. Months ago, before the vaccine, actually, so it's more than months ago, I had dreams of long lines of people getting vaccinated and all kinds of really nasty stuff coming out of it. That was dreams that I had, like around about a year ago. I had a string of them.
See, that's interesting because I've had none, and then when I ran across that this is a phenomenon and was being researched, I was really kind of surprised by that.
No, look, it's hard to tell on this one because we get pounded by pandemic. There is nothing else. Even you go on the sports channel, you'll find out which guys were vaccinated and which ones weren't.
Yeah.
And which teams are getting COVID now. I mean, it's amazing. It's the new scoreboard. So we're being pounded nobody's talking about anything else. It's hard not to incorporate that in your dreams. Because remember, we have biology. If you take Casey's model, we have biology, biography, precognition, which means I can feel what's happening somewhere else, and then clairvoyant, what's going to happen. I like that model. I've felt those things. I've experienced them myself. My patients have too. But that's not what patients are not coming to me to reveal the great psychic. They're coming, because they're upset about something, or they're anxious, or they're depressed, or whatever they're using substances, whatever the heck is going on. They want to be symptom free. So I try to relate what they dream to some kind of dynamic that means something to them. Now, of course, if you go back in time, in my own timeline, about once a decade, I will have a dream that is so different from every other dream in texture, that I take notice of it. And around 1990, I had a dream that I was at a big rock concert. There were hundreds of thousands of people there, and there was Dr. Jung. He looked better than this because he looks a little chalky here. And he was standing in front of a movie marquee, and he pointed up to the marquee, and I looked up and it said, "Spirituality is the answer." That's not that's not a normal dream. Okay, it was a very different kind of dream. It felt different. It felt the same. You know how dreams have kind of a, sometimes they'll have a thin consistency or a very molasses, you can't really move.
Right. Yeah.
It felt just like I was here. It felt clear. And I'll never forget the feeling of looking up at that marquee, seeing the sign and knowing that I was heading for a different phase in my professional life and maybe in my personal life too. So there are these kind of dreams, and I'm not sure if there's a special name for them. I might have come across it at one time. I just know that they're different, and I have about once every 10 years. I've had another one relating to music, but the main thing is what I want to do is see how I can marry what the patient's dream is to what's going on in their world. Now, how can you not have pandemic dreams?
I don't know. Does that mean that analyze me? Does that mean I'm broken? Because I can honestly say I haven't had one pandemic dream.
It could be that you're healthy enough to fend it off.
I
Because
doubt
nothing you
that.
can do about it. Well, probably
I
not.
doubt that. What about recurring dreams? How do you interpret them?
Well, if we go with I like it when somebody brings a recurring dream in. In my model that I use more than anything else, where the dream is a story about the dreamer, but it's in code. I look at a recurring dream as your subconscious telling you, please look at this one.
Like,
You know,
you're not paying attention.
You need to, I got to get your attention. You got to look at this. And every time, I should say every time, the far vast majority of times that people look at the recurring dream, it is a barn burner, and it's something they really need to look at in their lives. And especially if we can crack the symbolic code on it. I mean, very often it'll lead us to trauma.
Didn't the gestalt therapy movement pick up after Jung? I mean, we talked about, like, Freud, started the dream interpretation in 1899, which isn't true. I mean, they've been interpreting dreams since the Epic of Gilgamesh, or so. I mean, it goes back in all different. But that was a neurologic or a psychoanalytic approach that was definitely novel. But then, like, we talked about the changes Jung might have made. Didn't the Gestalt therapists get, like, really into dream interpretation in the 60s?
Absolutely. They did a lot of dialoguing. They put the dream in a chair or something and talk to it, and that's all cool. I just it just doesn't resonate with me. I'd much rather talk about the patient's life and just sort of say, well, what, take, and I guess it's not so different from what they do, but they were a little more dramatic, believe it or not, because I get pretty dramatic, but they were a little more dramatic than I was about technique-y stuff. But it's not that different from what I do. Okay, so a certain symbol shows up. George Takei. What does George Takei mean to you? Well, Star Trek. I love science fiction. I like Japanese. I don't know, whatever the heck it is. As it unfolds, usually I can see where it's fitting into the person's life. Because they're just going to rock and roll with it. It's going to say, well, in this dream, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, well, yeah, I was in Pittsburgh once, or whatever they're going to tell me, and then I'll just keep asking questions till we hit it. And I'll provide if there's a classical, people will dream of houses, let's say. Very often the house is your body, and the different rooms are the different organ systems. If you go back, though, what Edgar Cayce said about when Jesus talked about many mansions, that was supposedly past lives.
Makes sense.
But it really, it's all a metaphor. And really what matters is that, once again, we're making the unconscious conscious, but in the effort of being able to deal with life more effectively.
Well, the Gestalt, my memory is the Gestalt people, and I could be wrong on this, they were either more focused or equally focused on inanimate objects, whereas most people are looking at the animate objects and your emotional connection, because you're more likely to have emotional connection to another person or an animal or a snake than you are a chair. But my memory was the Gestalt interpretation included, like, what symbology was there? Was there a lamp in the room? Was there a chair? How big was? I mean, they were looking at a lot of. To me, it almost looked like micro interpretation.
Well,
versus Harry Stack Sullivan. Remember, had dream distillation.
I think that's why the Gestalt didn't appeal to me that much. To me, it's the big washes of things that make more sense to me. That these little details, sometimes you could get something out of it, but I think more of the time what's happening is people are making it up to please their therapist. So say, well, tell me more about that dream. Well, you were in a room. What kind of chair was it? What was a chair? What kind of chair? What color was it? I don't know what color. Well, what color was it? Well, I don't know. Maybe it was black. Black. I don't do that kind of stuff. To me, I don't get anything out of that. I want to see what kind of emotion is the person experiencing for the symbols that they have. Maybe as they explore it, they can come up with more. But I think that, I'll give you another one. I studied with a guy who did object relations.
Yeah.
It took me a year to figure out that the object was a person, I don't know. You go, part object, it was like the eye or your jaw or something.
They could have explained that better at the beginning.
No kidding. It was great. But I remember him saying he had a patient, and she came, and in the dream, she came to his office, and there was a monkey in the chair. And he said to me, yeah, we're all just a bunch of baboons, aren't we? Well, yeah, I agree. The patient, obviously didn't think he knew what he was doing. And with some of the interpretations he had, maybe she was right.
Are there, well, I'm teeing this one up for you. Kind of. I'll just skip over the teeing it up. I find it interesting. I mean, look, we're humans. We all think we're unique and different, but pretty much every thought you ever had and you ever will had, someone else has already had, probably millions of people have had, and probably billions to come will have. So we all have like a shared life experience. So it's not uncommon that there are common dream themes that come out, which to me I've always found fascinating. So I was going to ask you about it, but I'm going to just tell you about them, because I looked up what are the most common dream themes in American culture in I think it was this summer was where I got this data from. And it was interesting. And I don't know if these are in order, but falling is a very common dream theme. Being chased, I can relate to that one. Dying, which I cannot relate to. I'm going to save the best for last. Being naked in public. I used to have that recurring dream as a kid. Like I rushed out the door so fast, I forgot to put my pants on, and everyone laughed at me at school because I was naked or in my underwear. Pregnancy, haven't had any pregnancy dreams. Flying, which I consider that falling maybe. And then cheating, back to George Takei. Infidelity, sex, some sort of that type of intimate recurring theme. Is that because those are a challenging fears to our deep psyche? Is this just because we're all humans having a shared human experience and these are the themes that pop out? I didn't get to the best one. The teeth cracking and falling out dream. I had that dream so much when I was a kid. And it's interesting. It's a very common theme that a lot of people, if you ask them, they'd say, oh yeah, I've had that dream where, you know, my teeth all shatter and fall out. How do you interpret that? What in the world does that mean?
Which, all of them, or just the teeth?
The teeth. The teeth is my favorite.
Well, that's you know, that there's a couple of classical interpretations. One is that you're losing the structure. Teeth are structure. You're losing your ability to bite into life. That, you know, that you can't take a bite into things. You can't get nourished. There may be a few others, but I want to know what was going on in a person's life at that particular time. But the bigger question is this a human experience? Absolutely. But each person has their own symbology, how they do it. Now, if you ask someone like Samantha, who I work with, the body therapist, she'll look up which tooth is in trouble, and there'll be a certain meaning behind that tooth from a mind-body perspective. Dreams are a little funkier because the unconscious will hide the true meaning because it's hard to take. Although I do have you talked about that dream where you go to school without your clothes on. One of my buddies worked in a drug and alcohol program, and he was doing a group for court-ordered stuff. And this biker dude came up to him who had missed one of the classes. You get 2 and then you go back to jail. So he says, if I find out you marked me, he says, you didn't mark me absent, right? And my friend, he's a feisty guy, said, well, I don't make the rules here. Just don't miss another group. So the guy said, if I find out that you marked me absent, I'm going to be your worst nightmare. He said, oh, you mean where I go to school only wearing my underwear? and he never had any more trouble with this guy. These are anxiety dreams.
Yeah, anxiety seems to be a theme that comes up a lot.
For example, if you dream about bugs, it's
right.
what's bugging you.
Or animals in general, or
animals in general are a little different because there's certain animals will reflect feelings about power, powerless,
survival, or nature.
You know, I remember a dream where this stork came up to me, and I looked at him, and he goes, "Just finish your book, man."
Well, babies are a common dream symbol. I know.
Well, the book was like another child that I was birthing.
A new start, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really funny because he sort of looked a little bit like Groucho Marx, and I was expecting a little cigar, but he just went, "Just finish your book, man." Recently, yeah, I had one of the most symbolic dreams, and it was about. I think it was really about the next chapter in our practice lives. Anyway, in the dream, I'm walking down a street in San Francisco. I have a favorite noodle shop that I love on Taraval Street in San Francisco. And I get there and it's like, it's decrepit, it's condemned, and it's falling apart. And I went, oh man, what happened? And then I said, well, there's other noodle shops. And I realized I wasn't wearing shoes and I had to go back and get my shoes. And then somebody tried to put a loafer on one of my feet, and it was all decrepit and gooey, and I kicked it off and I got to my home. And when I got there, I went, oh my God, I haven't fed the fish in months. I wonder if they're still alive. So I went to the tank and I put some food in, and then there was a feeding frenzy because I hadn't fed them. And I tried to put more in, and one of them jumped out, and I grabbed at it and I missed, and then I got it back in the tank. And now they're all eating, and I'm going, wait a minute, I didn't have the bubbler on. They're dying. They don't have oxygen. I found the switch. I hit the bubbler. All this dust started, whatever, the sand in the tank, and I couldn't see anything. I went, oh my God, they're all going to die. And I turned around and they were all alive. And they were just hanging there like silver dollars. They looked like this, beautiful. And then I went out. I found shoes, and it was amazing because they were never shoes I would actually wear. They were like loafers that on the top had a heart. And then I went outside, and there was this workman with a ladder, and he says, somebody left a book by the pool. I think it might be yours. Go get it. Well, when I woke up, I went, wow, I really need to think about this. It's time to let those ideas, the fish tank were ideas, I think, that were being in a tank. And I thought they were dead. And I have to put food in them and I have to put oxygen and they're alive. And now we can work with them. And, the workman has a ladder. The ladder is going up. Then the next vista that we have to deal with is the spirituality of what's happening in our world right now. So to me, personally, because I've been working with my dreams for so long, that dream made incredible sense to me. And I started mapping out, well, what's next? I felt it was a strong message from someone, my unconscious maybe, some higher being that wants me to do something. I'm okay either way with it. It doesn't matter to me. I still need to do it. Was it from the collective unconscious? Sure, it could have been.
How about this one? Lucid dreams. Would you interpret, and I know the way you interpret isn't just like an object and then look on a chart, it's symbol. You're talking about the content of the dream in the overall context of that person's place in life, what's going on, their family, their stressors, their fears, their traumas. I get that piece, but if you kind of come from interpreting the symbols, I guess, does lucidity change the interpretation?
Well, it only changes it in that you can get the person to actually help you with it. There was a guy, I think we talked about it in our podcast on lucid dreams, where he said there were these two guys I was chasing him. And I said, well, why don't you ask them who they are? And one said, I'm your fear. And the other said, I'm your anger. So I really didn't have to interpret that one. I would interpret it just the same. What is the person's model of the universe? How does this fit with their model of the universe, with what they're going through in their lives, what their goals are, what their traumas are, what their loves are? I mean, I had a dream and I was really struggling with the band, and I'm backstage at a big music hall, and there's Tom Petty there, and you know how much I love Tom, and and it was a slight bit of lucidity, I think, because I said to him, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?" Well, he smiled at me and reached out and shook my hand and said, "Stick with your vision. Remember, it's about the music." And all of a sudden, I didn't want to. The frustrations I was having were gone because I knew that there were. And where did that come from? I don't know. Now, I've had visitations in dreams. My parents came to me on their way out as they died, both of them. They said goodbye in a dream, and I woke up and I knew they were gone. They were both ill, so it wasn't like I didn't know it was possible. But it's kind of uncanny that when the phone rang and I woke up, I knew what it was because I was having that dream. They were saying goodbye to me.
Did you have a sense of knowingness that was maybe a precognitive thing? Okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't know if that would always accompany it. There was a great show before. Remember, well, before Twilight, or was it after Twilight Zone, there was a great show called Amazing Stories in the early 80s. And it was basically like a Twilight show thing. And there's a character that has a dream that a plane crashes and has the details of it. But what I found interesting is that they showed that like anyone could have a dream about a plane crash. At what point do you know or suspect or worry about it being actually some precognition? Because in the show, she's 100% convinced that it's going to happen. She drives herself to the airport and she starts seeing people from her dreams at that point, and then does anything and everything in her power to try to have them cancel the flight, and then of course everything plays out almost Final Destination style in the way of her dream. Is that kind of what happened with you, or when you had the visitation you just knew?
Oh, I just knew. Listen, my
Yeah.
parents were ill. They were aged and ill, and I knew it was, certainly possible. But it was, if you want to say, it was a pretty big coincidence that I would have that dream and I'd wake up to find out that they had just passed. I think that these things, I always ask people when they're grieving, have has the person come to you in your dreams? And I had a guy who was having a lot of relationship issues, and we traced it back to his mother's death when he was a 9-year-old. And so I said, well, what happened the night she died? Well, I said goodnight to her, I kissed her, and I went to bed. And then the next morning, they told me that she had died. No emotion at all. I said, run that by me again. No emotion. I said, okay, go dot to dot. You go upstairs, you go to bed, and then it hit me. Go to sleep. What do you dream? And he went off like a 12 alarm fire. She came to me. I begged her not to leave. She said she had to go. And that was where he was holding the emotion. Now, I find, look, you can interpret that any way you want. I call it a waking dream, where my cousin who died at 9/11 came to me asked me to tell my aunt that he was okay and that she could end her grief. And he looked terrific. He had all his hair back. He really looked beautiful. He was wearing a white shirt, button-down shirt, faded blue jeans, no shoes or socks. And in that dream,
and they're always like 30 years old too. Why
I know,
that?
it's pretty amazing. Although I did see my grandparents, and I saw them as aged. They were in that dream telling me, come on up the stairs. And then my friend Arnold took me to my cousin. Well, when I told my aunt about it, her response was, you think you're the first person to tell me this? He's come to everyone in the family with the same message. I'm okay. You can end your grief. Who knows? Because he died at the World Trade Center, that was kind of a universal thing. It might have affected people differently than if it was, a death we're more used to, illness or accident. That was a universal event. We seem to plug into these kind of things because they become big symbols for us. And what I've noticed, because one of my teachers, psychotherapy teachers, had me track my dreams. And that's where I started learning that I had a language in my dreams that I could use to help me understand myself. And that's what I do with the patients, actually. Try to find the language that helps them understand themselves better so that they can be more effective in their relationships, in their work, in their relationship to God, in their own version of spirituality, and what you believe about it. I mean, I've had dreams that I'm convinced were messages about past lifetimes. I don't have any proof of this, but it seems pretty odd that I would have certain dreams that would seem very, very real. A dream of an earthquake and flooding and me being trapped in the flood. I mean, it was right out of what I read about Atlantis. Okay. Why was I having this as a 5-year-old? I remember clear as a bell thinking when I got up, what the heck? I mean, I don't know what I was using for language, but what is this? Why am I having a dream like this? Well, maybe, I mean, I didn't know anything about Atlantis. I didn't dream about, I hadn't read anything. I had this dream. When I later became aware of some of these things, I went, wow, could I have been dreaming about Atlantis? It makes sense based on what I read. I don't know. Hard to know. Could have been just that my home, was flooding with emotion, and there were earthquakes going on around us. I don't know, but I like to go as expansively as I can and find what works for the person. I don't have to be right, and I don't have to be correct. I want to help people, and I find dreams, I think Freud's idea, they're the royal road to the unconscious. They are a road to the unconscious if we're mindful and we go into the patience world. To me, that's the key. The patience model of the universe. Plus, we're not going to ignore classical interpretation or what Jung said or even what Freud said. I don't want to ignore it. But my first thing is going to be, what does it mean to you? I think that's where psychoanalysis, one of the reasons psychoanalysis went out of favor is if a person didn't fit the theory, they were somehow wrong. There's no wrong. What does it mean to you? What do you want to work on in your life? How does it connect to your relationships? How does it connect to your work? How does it connect to your goals in your future, to anything you need to work on in your past? That's what I look for.
How often do you utilize dream interpretation in your practice?
In my first session, I give people, a 1 minute, if you have some interesting dreams, bring them in, because sometimes, they're in code. If we could break the code, we can go a little faster. And sometimes they bring them in, sometimes they don't. Some people are fascinated with dreams. Some people just think it's ridiculous,
Yeah, I feel like people largely ignore it, but then that select few or that select percentage that are really emotionally convinced that the content of the dream or the dream sequence is going to reveal, almost like a horoscope, deep insights into a situation or relationship or their lot in life.
Well, because I do give a commercial in the first session, it's not the first sentence, but it's the first session, that I think these things can be useful, then they were more likely to bring them to me than other therapists.
Well, if you ask, certainly, but the small percentage of people might bring that to you and say, oh my gosh, I had this dream. This is what happened. What does it mean? And I'm guessing the way that you interpret their dream might be different than if you asked someone or just blanket made this statement, do you have any recurring dreams or nightmares, which sometimes we ask for screening for PTSD even. And
I always, yes, for that I always ask, if they're bringing up a trauma, are you having nightmares about it?
Sure. And then they'll say, maybe they say, well, I used to have a recurring nightmare of my teeth falling out when I was a kid. You're going to treat the first patient the role of dream interpretation differently because they have put more symbolic value on it, correct? Rather than the second person where it's, well, I read on the internet that your teeth falling out has something to do with control and anxiety or whatever.
Well, I'll just ask them, could it be, we'll go through that, see if it makes sense to them, and how does it apply to your life? I mean, it's not just, oh, well, it's this, it's, well, how does it apply to you? Okay, if it works, otherwise we'll look for other things. I don't know. Well, it's much more jazz than classical is all I would say.
I like that. That's a good place to bookmark it for all the time we got today. But I was thinking we were talking about placebo next week.
Ooh, I like that.
Speaking of dreams, I will explain the common denominator and the connection there next week. But
I like it.
It's one we've talked about doing for a while, and I got a special request recently to do placebo. So we're going to talk about anything and everything placebo related.
Everything placebo. Isn't that a punk band?
The ins, the outs, and the what have yous.
Of placebo.
Of placebo, Domingo.
Well, with that in mind, be well.
Hey, I gotta thank you. This was you're our honored guest. So,
oh, are you kidding? I love doing this stuff. To me, really again, there is one thing that I didn't mention that I probably ought to. A lot of mystics think all of this is a dream, that everything we're doing is a dream, and I have felt that more since the pandemic started than ever before in my life.
Even Bill Shakespeare.
Willie the Shake, you bet he did.
All the
think
world's
he
a
said it
dream.
was a stage, but maybe he said it was a dream. I don't know. Anyway,
Some dead white guy.
anyway, if this is a dream, it's pretty interesting one, and it doesn't seem to want to go away like other ones do.
Well, until next week, nano.
Be well.
Or no, that's not our motto. Not nano. I always get that confused.
Live
It's
long and prosper.
not that one either. No, definitely not that one either.
Be
Be well. Oh, we got new bags out there with Be Well on it. Did you see it? Oh, I got to give you one.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Yes. See you next week. I'll see you in 2 minutes.
Fokker out.